Welcome to Birchum Buddies, the world's only Mr. Birchum fan podcast. Joining me as always is my co-host, Count Dracula. Good evening. Unfortunately, this will be our first and only episode. As it turns out, there is no interest in a podcast about Mr. Birchum, either from advertisers or audiences, or for that matter, from me, the host. What's that? You don't know who Mr. Birchum is? Okay, asshole, I'll tell you. Mr. Birchum is an adult animated sitcom produced by the Bog Monsters at the Daily Wire. And literally, nobody made me watch it. Nobody asked for this. It's created by and stars Adam Carolla as the titular Senior Birchum, a middle school woodshop teacher who, let's just say, well, I don't actually know all that much about him, come to think of it. Not a strong character. He's kind of always grousing about everything. He has a deeply irritating voice.
Love our new parking spots. This year, the school finally shows us they actually appreciate what we do.
But other than that, I wouldn't say he has much in the way of personality in the conventional sense. But what he lacks in personality... Good comedy seems effortless, spontaneous, magical. Mr. Birchum is a great reminder of how much effort it actually requires. The exact amount? A little bit more than was put into this.
Who'd you have to win?
Sure thing.
We are to believe that this is a passion project for Mr. Carolla, who's been thinking about and developing this character ever since he originally came up with him to call into a radio station and do a funny voice, and then later used him as a puppet for the puppet prank call program Crank Yankers, which, if you were born in this century, you mercifully aren't familiar with. In the intervening decades, he couldn't think of anything the character might want to say or do, or a story to tell with him, but he claims he did pitch this cartoon to a number of mainstream media networks, who all rejected it for not being woke enough or some lame-wad excuse like that. Having watched the currently available first season, I don't think that's true. Not even a little bit. There is very little to be offended by in Mr. Birchum. And what little there is feels almost obligatory, like they're going through the motions of remembering to include something transphobic or adding little quips about how everyone hates Budweiser, whatever the Daily Wire's little culture war bugaboo is at the moment. It very much feels like a normal, albeit incompetent sitcom at war with itself over the editorial constraints of being a sitcom produced by the Daily Wire. The main character is written as this surly, selfish slob who has to learn to soften up around the kids, right? He's disinterested in his work, he's combative, insensitive, and despite constantly lecturing everyone else, particularly anyone younger than him, about the virtues of hard work, he himself is kind of good for nothing. He does the bare minimum at his job, and what little he does seems motivated more by personal gain and the opportunity to be deliberately cruel to his students than any desire to put in an honest day's work. We're told, of course, that he's good at woodworking, but it's 5 episodes before we even see him actually do that. So the natural arc for a character like that, right, is to show them empathizing with the people around them, to learn he cares more than he thinks he does, have him get inspired to teach the kids or have to change in some way or sacrifice something. You know, a story, but he can't do that. Being ideologically conservative first and comedic second means that no matter how boorish and spiteful Birchum is, he has to remain a symbol of traditional male authority. He has to always be right, and he has to always win. And everyone else has to always come around to his way of thinking. Just like how your ungrateful grandkids should be forced to call you more. There's a scene that illustrates this pretty well in the pilot. Not the unaired pilot that he was shopping around to other networks, but the Daily Wire pilot. Birchum gives his stepdaughter Jeannie a long talk about how she should efficiently press the buttons on the microwave, and it's quicker to press 3 twice than to press 3, then move your finger to 0, and what's the difference between 33 seconds and 30 seconds of microwaving? His son, a nerdy shut-in content creator like me, points out that you could just press the 30-second button. And then Birchum rolls his eyes and admonishes his son for being such a little lazy bones. And do you see how that's almost a joke? About how Birchum is chiding his son for being lazy, for doing the exact same thing that he's doing, but better. A more clever show, or at least a show that wasn't shackled by these ideological constraints, would highlight that dichotomy. But here, Birchum always gets the last word. He always gets to be the one who sits in judgment of everyone else. He gets the last laugh, and the joke is never on him. There's a lot of stuff like that. A lot of stuff where you can feel the show rubbing up against the ideological constraints placed on it. Only Birchum is ever correct. Other characters should always listen to and obey Mr. Birchum. And then he'll give a big speech and everyone will realize, oh, yeah, actually you're right, and you always were, and all conflict will end. Other characters can only demonstrate virtue by agreeing with Mr. Birchum. Okay, so in episode 1, we meet Birchum and his best friend Gage, the school's auto shop teacher or some shit. I don't know if that's what it's called, auto shop. My high school didn't offer anything cool where I could cut my fingers off, so a lot of this is lost on me. They pal around being pals because they're friends, even though, you know. Enter Mr. Carponzi, and folks, don't panic, but he's a liberal. You can tell because he says every liberal word that the writers could think of.
I'm a heteronormative, cisgendered white male, for which I apologize.
What?
He can't say heterosexual white male. If he said that, their audience would hoot and holler and think he was the hero of the story. Those are good guy words. He has to use the bad, liberal word heteronormative, even though it makes no sense in this context. That doesn't matter to them, because they don't know what it means. The word heteronormative would mean that he views things through the lens of heterosexuality being the default, which the character decidedly does not. And every other character absolutely does. It's just such an incredible distillation of this show's whole deal. Birchum sets to work berating his class and getting mad that they're bad at woodworking, even though it is entirely his job to teach them how to be good at that. Almost all of his students are failing, and that's not because he's a bad teacher, it's the students who are wrong, and he offers them an extra credit assignment to refinish his deck.
There is a way you can still pass my class and get out of the corral. Show up at my house at 0 Light 30 this Saturday for a donkey workday. This is a top secret extra credit op. If I get a call from any of you donkeys' parents, you'll never leave the corral again.
Pretty sinister that he instructs his students not to tell any other parents what they're doing. That reads very much as, at the very least, Birchum being aware that what he is doing is against the rules, something other people would not approve of. But he's willing to do it anyway for selfish reasons. And in a real story, a character would need to learn a lesson about that. Let's see if Birchum does. Carponzi sees the kids working for Birchum after school hours without school or parental approval and brings Birchum before a disciplinary committee. And we, the audience, are meant to see this as a villainous and deeply silly thing to do. Birchum discusses this with Gage, and this is an opportunity for them to just insert some talking points. Just dump them all in one space. Get it out of the way. Don't write them into the story or themes, just say them right here.
They can't touch me. I'm black, and I'm non-binary.
You don't even know what that means.
You're an average white guy, but this is how I identify with the district. I'm bulletproof.
Now, what's interesting about this scene is nothing. But what comes closest to being interesting is that the show actually makes a joke about a trans student that actually kind of works.
Last semester, I got written up for saying this kid threw like a girl. But then, 2 months later, that same kid started identifying as a girl, and nobody apologized to me. Crickets. I was early money.
I think that's honestly a pretty well-written in-character joke, one of the very few in the show. Crucially, one which seems to hinge on the characters recognizing the validity of the kid's identity, even if they're insensitive jerks about it. And I highlight this not to congratulate them on successfully making one non-hateful joke about trans people, because trust me, they will get around to the hatred eventually, but because it kind of gives lie to the whole premise that this show is simply too controversial to be aired on network television. The show pulls its punches at every opportunity. At no point does it rise to the level of offensive, even for such sensitive little woke scolds like me. It's anti-woke in that it portrays woke people as being annoying, but doesn't actually seem to have any anti-woke opinions of its own to offer. Wow, quite a pickle Birchum's in. How's he gonna get out of this one? I bet the writers thought of a clever solution. Well, he makes a big speech, and he points out that he helped these kids get real-world experience and taught them the value of hard work or some shit like that. You know, he taught them the value of hard work by making them do his for him. Also, he points out that he similarly had students do projects like this for other teachers in the past, and again, it feels like the show is held back from making the joke that naturally fits here, that Birchum tactically bribed all of the other teachers so that in the event he was ever punished for using the students as free labor, something he knew was wrong, he could blackmail them and get away with it. And that joke fits with Birchum's character more than the one we get. He's lazy, misanthropic, and disinterested in his job. This is the type of thing he would do if this were a comedy. That would make him look clever. That's just thrown aside and replaced with him doing all of this to teach the kids really well. And the kids love it too, of course. They think it's cool and good, and they wave an American flag, I'm not kidding. You can't have Birchum abuse his authority. You can't have him get away with doing something bad. He's the macho white dad. He can't be wrong. The whole point is that Birchum's old school conservative values clash with the hippy-dippy school establishment, and he has to be right. He can't ever learn something from them. The world must change to accommodate him. There's a couple of B-plots. One is that Birchum's son Eddie is a gamer who makes money on Twitch, which Birchum does not like.
Eddie's got his own channel, and he's actually getting paid by subscribers.
Are you saying there are people out there who pay to watch Eddie do absolutely nothing?
This plotline is resolved when Eddie bags a hot chick with his cool gaming skills. So they can see eye to eye on that. That is good to fuck hot chicks. Cool stuff. Good old-fashioned conservative family values. Thank you, Mr. Birchum. The second, more substantial B-plot is about Jeannie learning to respect her mother, Wendy. They don't get along because, like all children, she naturally prefers her new stepfather to her mother. That rings true, doesn't it? We can all relate to the experience of instinctively preferring an emotionally distant step-parent to our doting bio-parent. Wendy attempts to bond with her by bringing her to work, selling a house, and Jeannie protests that Wendy painted a wooden fireplace, and all she cares about is wood, because Mr. Birchum is a wood guy. And then Wendy's actions have consequences, and she suddenly changes her entire point of view, and the conflict goes away, because it never mattered, who cares. Most of the characters in this show are voiced by Daily Wire talking heads. Jeannie, for example, is played by conservative darling Brett Cooper. Wendy is voiced by Megyn Kelly. I say voiced by very consciously, because I cannot in good faith call what Kelly is doing here acting.
Sawbuck's looking a little chubby-wubby, so I got him some new food. It's organic and vegan.
None of the voice acting in this show is all that impressive. As noted, Birchum's voice is incredibly goddamn irritating.
Dogs are supposed to eat meat. They're descendants of wolves.
But Megyn Kelly is just not equipped for this. She is not a good actor. She is standing in a 2-inch puddle, but still, somehow, out of her depth. To be fair though, I can't imagine anyone managing to turn in an actually funny performance given how absurdly bad this show is timed. There are these really weird, long pauses, just long enough to completely fuck up a joke.
It couldn't be simpler. Shirt for steel, belt for bunt, cap's the indicator. You got it.
Come on, Eddie, you got this.
Strike 3, you're out.
Ah!
It takes these great big long wind-ups and then just stops dead in its tracks right before delivering the punchline. Sometimes it doesn't even give you the punchline, it just implies it and leaves it to you to insert your own. I don't mean that to say that the show's humor is subtle, it's not.
Where's my coffee?
What does getting you coffee teach us about building?
Then I'm less likely to fail your terrible workmanship if I'm properly caffeinated.
I mean that jokes just meander endlessly until they abruptly cut away. Like they forgot to write a punchline for the joke they were telling. Like imagine if an elephant walked into a hardware store and asked the cashier if they had any shovels. And the cashier says, yeah, of course we have shovels. We're actually running a special on shovels. If you buy a shovel today, you get a free keychain. And the elephant says, well, I don't have any keys. Episode 2 follows Birchum and his Navy pals as they go on a pub crawl, trying to get as many free drinks and meals as they can for Veterans Day. They want to drink a lot of beer and eat many meals, and I don't really understand why they want that.
I call upon you, Meal Team 6, to join me once again in binging ourselves into a patriotic food coma. Hoorah!
Now, I'm a pretty fat person myself. I love to eat food, often a great deal of it, but never in my entire life have I felt compelled to have 2 discrete dinners, let alone, 5. The beer I get, right? Like, it's fun to drink a lot of beer. I have done this. But they make a big deal about how much they're gonna puke and how excited they are about that. And that kinda suggests something dark that the show is not at all willing to grapple with.
There's a 5-gallon bucket of sawdust. Remember, it's $100 if you yodel groceries. Looking at you, Gage.
In advance.
These men are so excited to get blackout drunk to the point of projectile vomiting. This apparently is a common occurrence for them. They do this every year. They're all middle-aged and have jobs. Where a show like The Simpsons, even a show like Family Guy, might use this as a springboard to criticize American drinking culture, or American food culture, or, anything, Mr. Birchum chooses instead, to not do that, to do nothing. You laugh because a character is throwing up, and that's gross, but it doesn't say anything about them or their world. There's nothing to consider about it. He's just kind of puking, and you should laugh. Instead of dealing with any of this, it's a story about them competing with the Army guys, because Army is different than Navy. Army is land, Navy is water, so they're competing. I'm not sure what the competition is. I think it's about who can eat and drink more. I'm not going to rewatch the episode to clarify. And why is it better to do that? Why is that something you want to brag about? How come? And whoever does the better job gets to be the only one to drink at the bar that they like. So that's the stakes of this one. And the Navy boys win, of course, but then decide to let the Army guys drink there because in the end, they're not all that different. And Veterans Day is about celebrating all veterans, which may I remind you, they are doing by eating and drinking until they projectile vomit everywhere. Hey, you can feel the absence of jokes which should be in this episode. Taking Veterans Day, which one would think a bunch of veterans would take very seriously, and making it all an excuse to eat and drink to excess, there is a joke which should be here about how these men see conspicuous, excessive consumption as synonymous with American patriotism. That the way of life they fought to preserve, and are holier than thou about fighting to preserve, is this disgusting hedonistic bacchanal. But they say no thank you to that joke, not today, Mr. Joke. And it was at this point that I first began to confront the enormity of the task before me. How does one criticize this show? How could one? There is nothing of substance here, no intent, no meaning. It's the fuzzy suggestion of a sitcom episode happening between scenes that we're not watching. You can't relate to it, you're not meant to. It's at once something you can watch, but also somehow something absent. What we have here is this damning indictment of American jingoism that cannot recognize itself as such because it is made by American jingoists with no interest in critiquing that, or really anything else for that matter. It bends over backwards to present these grown men getting so drunk that they're picking fights with statues and throwing up in kangaroo pouches as squeaky clean, good old-fashioned fun. It's really weird, it's really uncomfortable, but one thing it's not is funny ever.
He started. You keep my wife's name out of your damn mouth.
The B-plot in this one is that Wendy and Gage's wife, Dina, who are friends, even though, go on a spa day because they want to do girl things while their husbands are doing boy things. They too get drunk and end up in conflict when Wendy discovers that Dina didn't vote for Barack Obama and is in fact a conservative. I pause here to note, Dina was originally portrayed by Candace Owens before her acrimonious split from the Daily Wire. Owens was replaced with Sage Steele as though it matters who plays whom because all voices are provided with the same droning, lifeless monotone. Wendy feels shocked and betrayed that her friend is conservative even though everyone else she knows and loves also is. They argue back and forth, by which I mean Dina explains her opinions calmly and rationally, and Wendy sputters and freezes, unable to present any counter-argument. Because they can't even present a liberal opinion in jest. To make liberals look foolish by showing a foolish thing a liberal might believe. While conservatives always have a plain-spoken, simple answer to every question you can imagine. Or, every question they can imagine. Which is like 2 or 3. Their bickering annoys the 2 Vietnamese women who are massaging them, who go off on a very long, extremely racist rant about how these 2 should overcome their differences and recognize that they're lucky to live in the best country in the world. In their home country, Vietnam, they were doctors. But in America, they get to be masseuses, which just goes to show how America is good. Now, this does not seem at all related to what they were arguing about, but nonetheless, it makes the conflict go away. Bye-bye, conflict. Bye. See you later, conflict. If you're trying to make the point that white liberals feel entitled to speak for black people, a point I think is not without merit, perhaps don't insert that opinion into the mouth of racialized minorities whose role in your story is to explain why your culture is superior to their own. That feels like an easy error to avoid. Oh, there's also this B-plot that goes absolutely fucking nowhere about Carponzi discovering that Birchum called in Hooky and trying to snitch on him, which doesn't work because their boss, Principal Bortles, played by the late Roseanne Barr, who I assume is dead, I'm not Googling it, is a Coast Guard veteran or something, and is also independently, conveniently enough, going on the same pub crawl. Hey, Whole premise of this episode is that it is Veterans Day, a federal holiday. So why would the school be open? How did you not pay attention to your own script? Like, did you forget what the concept of the episode was? During the time that I was watching Mr. Birchum, I was also reading Super Gods by Grant Morrison. In the book, Morrison takes a characteristically New Age stance that fiction is, more or less, another plane of reality. That certain fictional characters and ideas are so potent that they just become as real as you or I, trapped inside a reality we can typically only access through the medium of fiction. Whether that is true in a literal sense or simply a useful metaphor is, to Morrison, a distinction without a difference. They seem to be of the opinion that the former is true, but they aren't particularly interested in convincing the reader to share that view. Since the focus of the book, and most of Morrison's career more broadly, is about American superhero comics, they tend to use Superman as the example of this phenomenon. We all know how Superman behaves. We know what is and is not a Supermanly thing to do. We can conjure an image of him in our heads that behaves, more or less, consistently with the image other people have in their heads. Superman, thus, is a sort of shared delusion or something that was created and made real, or something that was already real that we have contacted in another plane. And I don't know if I believe that. I probably don't. But I do know that fiction people care about feels alive. There's an ineffable spark to it, even when it's bad, even when it's poorly crafted. There's still the sense that there's someone else, someone, trying to communicate something to you, trying to tell you something that can't be expressed in words alone. We are creatures of story. We've always told stories, we always will. Neolithic proto-humans would gather around the fire and tell stories, imagining things which weren't, and in so doing, making them, in their mind, real. That little spark of reality is absent in Mr. Birchum. There is no life here, no voice, no craft. When we stop watching, and we should, Mr. Birchum and the other characters cease to exist. They don't keep living their lives. They're not alive, not like Superman, and certainly not like you or I. What we have here is not fiction, not as we know it. This is something else, an attempt by some sort of malicious alien consciousness to weaponize fiction without understanding the power it holds in its hands, or whatever it has in lieu of hands. This being knows a story should have characters, it should have conflict, but it doesn't know what these things mean or why they're important to people. So the characters are these unliving simulacrum of sitcom archetypes. The conflicts exist to waste the characters' time and then just end unceremoniously without anyone having to actually do anything or struggle in any way to solve them. You're not meant to feel anything. You're not meant to enjoy it. It's just there to artlessly pretend to be the same as other stories, to lie in waiting until it can snare the imagination of some unsuspecting bystander who didn't know better, or better yet, camouflage itself inside the minds of culture war dipshits who share its contempt for everything, surviving on the crumbs of word of mouth they're happy to supply, because they hope somewhere, somehow, it will upset someone outside the howling void of jealousy they have confined themselves within. In episode 3, Birchum's table saw goes kaput. So that's his motivation in that one. He likes his table saw, but the brand that he bought it from, which is the only good brand, has been bought out by a Chinese mega conglomerate. So his son Eddie suggests a brand of tools that sponsored one of his streams, and so Birchum and Jeannie go to this hip, happening tool store full of millennials who only care about feelings and Wi-Fi, not about tools and stuff like men, guys, fellas. Speaking as a millennial, we're now in our late 30s, early 40s. Mr. Birchum and his wife should be millennials, unless the show is meant to take place like 15 years ago or something. And it might, because, that's when he started developing it. What does any of this mean? What is this meant to represent? Is this an Apple store? Because it looks like an Apple store, and they make fun of the Genius Bar, but what does that have to do with anything? Apple doesn't sell tools, Apple sells computer. So he walks through the store, and people are rude, and they're mean to him, and all of the tools have confusing gimmicks and unnecessary electronic features, and who has this, or anything like this, ever happened to? What is the show attempting to parody here? How are we meant to relate to this? I have bought many tools in my life, a hammer, a screwdriver. This has never happened to me. His new table saw is voice activated, but you have to be super woke with it.
It says here you have to address Aaliyah in an inclusive tone.
Like if you're not woke with Alexa, it won't turn on. What are you mad at? What is it that you're talking about? Why are you mad? So the saw breaks, but don't worry. Birchum discovers that the CEO of the Chinese conglomerate is giving a keynote speech, and he intends to ambush him and force him to honor the lifetime warranty of his table saw. Let us now take a moment to count the discrete ways that they botched this alleged joke.
This is the fight for my life. Time guarantee. Sorry, sawdust in my throat.
Wouldn't have been a great joke to begin with, but, Carolla absolutely eats shit on the delivery. He doesn't really do anything with his voice to indicate that it's different from normal. Birchum's voice always sounds gravelly and strained because Carolla is a terrible voice actor, doesn't know what he's doing. And it doesn't at all feel unusual the way he's speaking here. For that matter, it begs the broader question, why is Carolla putting on a voice for Mr. Birchum at all? He already has a distinctive voice that suits the character. So he says there's sawdust in his throat, right? But clearly that's not it. Clearly, it's because of the smoke from the battery that just exploded. That's what made his throat scratchy. Why did they add this? It's so confusing. Let me tell you a secret about Mr. Birchum. It's not meant to entertain you. It's not meant to entertain its conservative audience either. I'm sure they'd consider it a bonus if it did that, but that's not the point. The point is simply to have a product they can put beside other cartoons, The Simpsons, South Park, Family Guy, etc., and say, look, we can do it too. Conservatives can make cartoons just like normals can. A point which did not need to be made because half of the liberal cartoons they're attempting to compete with are themselves made by conservatives. I think it's a pretty big stretch to say that, like, South Park, for example, is liberal in nature. But Daily Wire-type conservatives view themselves as iconoclasts, as stalwart holdouts against the liberal hegemony they imagine has a vice-like grip on the entertainment industry. By pretending to enjoy something like this, they imagine themselves reclaiming power from their phantom oppressors. Like all American conservatism since Trump did Trump stuff, it's just about spite, right? They're just thumbing their nose at an enemy that doesn't even need to exist anymore. But don't worry, they can laugh at themselves too, just watch.
Hey, pal, want my autograph? I thought Gilbert Gottfried was dead.
Adam Carolla does not sound like, look like, or tell jokes like Gilbert Gottfried. The joke is so easy. You just have Mr. Birchum say, who are you supposed to be? Carolla says, I'm Adam Carolla. Long pause. Then Mr. Birchum says, who cares? Easy, done. It's so easy to write a joke. You can write jokes by accident. So Birchum drops onto the stage with a bunch of drones, and he does a superhero landing and interrupts the CEO speech, and I swear to God, I'm not lying, I'm not making this up. Before he even says anything, they start applauding him. They're just like, yeah! There's a guy's on stage. Fuck yes! He gives a big speech about how good it is when tools last, and it's bad when tools break. And the CEO is like, you make a good point, Mr. Birchum. I'm gonna make good tools from now on. Hooray! Birchum gets a new saw. The conflict is over. Bye-bye, conflict. But joke's on him, because the table saw has a spy cam in it, which reports his every action to the Chinese government. The dastardly Chinese will get all of his info, which is worse than the American company also stealing people's info that they brought up earlier in the same episode for some likely racist reason. Viewers of this channel might pick up on something a little bit strange here. All of the things that are being incoherently criticized in this episode are just capitalism. Big companies buying out smaller mom and pop stores, manufactured obsolescence, privacy violations from corporate spyware. These are the results of the free market left to police itself. You dumb fucks, you did this. So there's a B plot where Carponzi is doing a school play, but here's the funny part about the play is that the play, unlike a traditional play, is woke. It's called Romeo and Romeo, and are you laughing yet? Gage is busting a gut. Gage is losing its mind with how funny all of this is.
It's called Romeo and Romeo.
This is gonna be great. Yeah, this is perfect. Forget the play. Record this. We can all retire. This is must-see TV.
Good thing he's laughing, because, the audience needs to be told that this is meant to be funny. Also a C-plot where Eddie does Mr. Beast stunts to help Wendy sell houses or something. They fill a hot tub with cheese, and that makes the house sell good. I don't know why. Why should I care? The writers didn't care about this plot. I'm embarrassed on their behalf to show you this.
You want to see what 15 cubic yards of endangered white tiger poop looks like? I'm about to find out. The hard way.
Cool, good. I'm not cringing out of my goddamn gourd. They do say eyeballs a lot in this clip.
Your boss said he wanted eyeballs. Eyeballs! The Fonduzzi will get eyeballs.
And I wrote in my notes to use that to transition to the eyeball zone, but I'm not gonna bother because fuck that, fuck this. I would be betraying the ethos of Mr. Birchum by doing something even that clever. I am confronting a yawning chasm of meaning at the center of this show, an emptiness that draws focus from everything else. They maintain the pretense that this show is a comedy from the point of view of a conservative, but it's not. It doesn't have a point of view. They do occasionally messily dump a bunch of conservative signifiers into a few scenes and hope that you don't notice that it didn't actually have anything to say. Not even like a shitty thing to say. Nothing. The idea that fiction is in some way metaphysically real is not unique to Grant Morrison. You've likely had the thought yourself at some point that maybe some story you like is actually happening out there somewhere in a parallel reality or plane of existence, right? Elizabeth Gilbert, yes, the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, went one step further than Morrison. In a TED Talk that was so meaningful to me that I didn't just buy the book she wrote based on it, but I also display it in the background of my videos, Gilbert explained how she thought of stories as a kind of magic. Rather than viewing the characters within a story as themselves alive, Gilbert positions the work in its entirety as somehow alive. The product of a collaboration between artist and art, where the art is the creator. She imagines creativity as a sort of muse or daemon that seeks out someone in our world in order to have itself created and gain entry.
But maybe it doesn't have to be quite so full of anguish if you never happened to believe in the first place that the most extraordinary aspects of your being came from you. But maybe if you just believed that they were on loan to you.
Morrison, I think, might find this idea interesting, but seems not to view it this way. In Supergods, they mention their confusion at the question of where writers get their ideas, saying that the answer always seemed obvious to me. I look inside my head, and there they are. Remember earlier when I said that Corolla was thinking about this character for 20 years? How something about it stuck with him all that time? I really sympathize with Corolla on that. On some level, he's experiencing what Gilbert calls big magic, the divine collaboration between artist and artwork, and the incumbent, cloying sense of responsibility that entails. Corolla has been performing the character since the 1990s, where he voiced Birchum on a radio call-in show, then the aforementioned puppet prank call program, and then a 2010 abortive pilot. Our proto-Birchums are pretty different from the ones we get. He's a larger-than-life, braggadocious blowhard, an old man angry at the world who exaggerates his own manliness and bravado to ease his discomfort about his shortcomings.
Have you done martial arts before?
Well, of course, they teach you Krav Maga when you sign up for the Marines, but that was 1967.
This Birchum is, in my opinion, real. Not special or all that interesting, but like a genuine expression of something. I can feel that little spark of reality within it. Take, for example, this clip from the abortive pilot.
Am I the only one who sees the irony in banning peanut butter at a school named after the guy who invented peanut butter?
Actually, he didn't invent peanut butter.
You're telling me George Washington Carver made axle grease and lantern oil out of peanuts but missed peanut butter altogether?
And I can't tell you what a breath of fresh air this moment is to me, because nothing like this happens in the show we get. Here, Birchum goes off on one of his trademark rants about how he's the only one seeing reason, but instead of just getting the last word and everyone else just sitting there silently awestruck by his brilliance, one of his students interrupts and corrects him. Birchum then gets flustered because his received wisdom, the common knowledge of American history he bases his worldview on, is challenged even in just a little way, and he doesn't know what to do with that. It isn't funny, but it does feel like two characters in a room having a conversation with one another. Or this proto-Birchum from The Man Show, which is... So The Man Show was a sketch comedy program in the early 2000s that was like a show for guys, a show for dudes. Because men it was a show so the men could have a show to watch, they would drink beer and they would watch women with big breasts jump on trampolines. Jimmy Kimmel also co-hosted it, and he frequently appeared in blackface. Observe Mr. Corolla performing yet another proto-Birchum.
First, You need to use a 7 1/4 skill worm drive hypoid saw and cut an access hole in the subfloor. Now, once you're in the underpinning, then you're going to want to use your Bosch blind drive rotohammer.
You can see there's something here, right? Corolla's character is a boring windbag. The kids are annoyed, and we, the audience, are meant to agree with the kids. This is a comedian playing a character, not a particularly skilled comedian or a particularly inventive character. It has strong nostalgia critic energy, but it's something. I get what he's going for. Don't get me wrong, Corolla is a talentless hack. Like, obviously, you know that. I don't have to tell you that. But he's capable of more than this. Anyone is capable of more than this. It's so easy to do better than this. Episode 4 puts Mr. Birchum in a life-or-death struggle to survive when he gets his jacket caught in a lathe, and then he spills denatured alcohol everywhere. So he's ticking clock, he's gonna die. And you might recognize that as the setup to tell a story, but don't be fooled, because we know by now that stories do not exist and are not possible in the world of Mr. Birchum. You're probably wondering how he got in this situation. Birchie Boy's going on a camping trip with Gage, where they're going to drink a great deal of beer. Isn't that funny? That's a thing men do. And for this occasion, he has bought a conspicuously indestructible jacket. Jeannie wants to go too. She wants to spend more time with her idol, Mr. Birchum, but she's being sent to theater camp where they're putting off a production of Pulp Fiction. The observant viewer might notice that Pulp Fiction is a movie and not a play. It is the setup for the most bone-chillingly cringe joke you will ever see in your life. One of the students in Mr. Birchum's class is doing badly, which again, not Mr. Birchum's fault. Any student that does badly in his class, it's their failure. Mr. Birchum has nothing to do with it, and Bircho tries to set him straight, and in so doing, inadvertently gets a ruler stuck in the lathe. Somehow. So then he has to stop by the school over the weekend to do some quick last-minute paperwork. Carpanzi made him do it, and he bitches and moans, of course, because he's the paragon of hard work, and he gets stuck in the lathe, is how that happened. Now, some solutions to this problem might have occurred to you. Firstly, take off your jacket. He can't, because it's too tight or something. Simply turn the lathe into reverse? Nope, the writers thought of that. Can't do that, because it doesn't. He tries to do it, and it doesn't. Why not? It doesn't. We don't need to write a joke or animate a reason why. It just doesn't. Tear your jacket? Nice try, dummy. It's an indestructible jacket is the thing. It was established earlier that this particular jacket, the jacket he's wearing, is indestructible. What good writing? He tries to call for help but drops his phone, and so 9/11 defaults to Spanish because immigrants are stealing America, you see. And he can't remember Spanish because his Spanish teacher in high school was too hot. So this episode, there's a bunch of flashbacks is the thing they're doing. He's looking back on his life and his regrets, like how he didn't become an astronaut because he saw some construction workers looking cool, or how his first wife left him through no fault of his own, of course, because one day she spontaneously realized she was gay out of nowhere. And also he killed his dog.
Sawbuck, no! No, don't fetch!
That is the sum total of his life's regrets. Perhaps he would regret more if he'd had to watch Mr. Birchum. Pause for laughter, pause for laughter. The scene where his wife leaves him is so very frustrating. It is very illustrative of Mr. Birchum's commitment to never, ever telling a story. That is the huge life event. Birchum should feel something. He should react. This is the woman he presumably loves, and the mother of his son. And she's walking out of his life forever. And he just kind of shrugs that off, and it's all a setup for a joke about how the only thing he regrets in that situation is not having a threesome.
I should have fought harder for the 2-chick arrangement.
And that makes him look like a complete psychopath. That makes him seem like he doesn't give a shit about anyone else or his family, which is clearly not what they were going for. Allow me to write this scene for you for free. Birchum's home early from work. He's brought his wife flowers. He walks in on her with another woman. He throws the flowers down in anger and says, "How could you do this to me after everything I've done for you?" Storms off. Then there's a long beat, right? You let that moment sit. It's very intense. And then he sheepishly sticks his head in the door and says, is there any possibility of me doing a threesome with you? That's how you do the joke, right? Because you have to establish that this is a thing that upsets people, that this is a situation where there should be a lot of high emotion, and then the fact that he's doing that goes against that expectation. That's a joke. I dropped my teleprompter remote. I'm so angry. It's fine. It's durable. I drop it all the time. Update. Actually, it wasn't fine. It disconnected. I had to go futz with it. This episode is where the budget really starts to run thin. The animation was never amazing, nor would I call it such words as skilled, passable, entertaining, etc. But it had this workhorse-like good enough quality that didn't draw attention to itself. But here, it's starting to look like a slideshow, like we're looking at the storyboards for the episode rather than the episode itself. And it's probably no coincidence that this is happening now, because this episode features the sole example of effort put into the entire show. There's an extended musical number that almost seems like someone somewhere gave a shit. That person's not me. I find it grating and indulgent. Again, I feel as though I'm observing the product of an alien consciousness. It has watched cartoons, and cartoons often have music. Humans seem to enjoy music. So let's put in a song. But why? What does it tell us? What are we meant to feel? What, if anything, are you trying to say? At this point, I don't even know why they bothered, making more show. You could just have a JPEG jitter around and make a loud buzzing noise, and the effect would be the same. I feel like I'm the only person in the audience of a play, and the actors are realizing in real time they don't need to bother, and the sets are being deconstructed, the lights are being shut off, but the show just doesn't end. I'm not allowed to leave.
Let the record show I'm a dick.
In Grant Morrison's 2008 comic Final Crisis, we see a world where stories went wrong, where the bad guys won, and always win, and there are no more happy endings. The villainous dark side has... Bear with me, you need a little context here. See this guy? This is Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby is, without the shadow of a doubt, the most important contributor to the field of American superhero comics. He helped create and co-create so many characters that you might have heard of. Captain America, Thor, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man. No doubt the bile is rising to some people's throats right now. These characters headline multi-billion-dollar artless blockbusters today, so it's difficult to think of them as disruptive and inventive. So all-encompassing is Kirby's influence on the genre. Like most creatives, he was never compensated fairly, and after an acrimonious split from Marvel over the rights to his original artwork, Kirby left to work for their chief rival, DC Comics. There he began what would have been his magnum opus, a sprawling cosmic epic called The Fourth World Cycle, telling the story of the new gods, the old gods having fucked off. In a career defined by innovation and creative genius, this was his most ambitious work to date, the one they'd remember him for, the story burning a hole inside him, begging to be born. You see, if Jack Kirby were Adam Carolla, the Fourth World Cycle would be his Mr. Birchum. But it was cancelled, obviously, before he could complete it. Kirby could never catch a fucking break, and for all that he contributed to the medium, for all the trillions his ideas have generated for others, he died broke. Are you surprised? You shouldn't be. Commerce is the enemy of art. Commerce is the force art must overcome to exist. Creatives make money for business people and bean counters who dream of a way to make all of this, to have all of the money, influence, and cultural cachet without them, to get the product without having to deal with a pesky producer. That's why they're so excited about the possibilities of AI-generated art. The ultimate expression of empty corporate nihilism. You want to know why creatives are typically left of center? It's not because of some decadent cabal of liberals enforcing their values. It's because creatives tend to be the first on the chopping block when the right gets their way. They tend to be stymied and cajoled into ruining their own work by the types of people who the right want to put in charge of everything, to put in charge of our health, to put in charge of our lives, and the lives and safety of our children. Their creations are altered to the point of irrelevance, only to create profits that they themselves will see very little of. Mr. Birchum is not that, right? The pointless commercialized media, that's most things. We're used to that. Most of the things we enjoy on a day-to-day basis, to one degree or another, are to some degree that. Like this video even, to some degree, is that. Mr. Birchum is something worse. Something more insidious. Something new. So anyway, all of this to say, in Final Crisis, Darkseid is the villain of Jack Kirby's Fourth World Cycle. He's the god of evil. He's an expression of what Jack Kirby saw as the worst that a being could be. In many ways, Darkseid is Kirby's reflection on the Nazis. Kirby was a Jew and fought in the Second World War, but more broadly, he represents a greater animating force which the Nazis were simply one manifestation of. So anyway, Darkseid. He's in control of the DC superhero universe, right? That in this story. Darkseid's goal has always been to find what's called the anti-life equation, a mathematical formula which allows one to subsume the will of others, rendering them lifeless drones. Not dead, but not alive in any meaningful sense, right? In Final Crisis, he has it, and we see the world filtered through the lens of ultimate authoritarianism, the greatest possible authoritarianism. So people live to produce for Darkseid. They consume, they die, and their lives are pointless and joyless, just like how Mr. Birchum preaches the values of hard work, despite he himself not enjoying doing that work. The people in Darkseid's world are taught to fear and scorn the different, just as the characters of Mr. Birchum possess an instinctive, immediate disgust towards anything that deviates from the narrow parameters of their familiarity. They are forbidden from forming meaningful connections with others, just as Birchum maintains an absurd emotional distance from his friends and family, to the point that when his wife leaves him, he doesn't react. This isn't simply corporate cynicism. It isn't even propaganda, as clumsily as it attempts to be, if you'll allow me. Mr. Birchum is anti-fiction. It exists in opposition to fiction, in reaction to fiction, but it itself is not that. And don't mistake me. I don't mean simply that it's poorly made fiction. It is poorly made, but it represents a new paradigm. It is fueled by the absence of talent, by the negation of talent, to take what would have otherwise become talent and bend it, twist it towards its own desires, making it something else. Mr. Birchum isn't simply the process of cutting out artists from the picture. Artists made this. Adam Carolla might not be creative, but he is a creative, right? While the animation is stiff and utterly miserable, it's competent enough that someone somewhere with a degree of talent and therefore passion for something had to be involved somewhere in the pipeline, right? Like they had to be. And I don't think any of them, at any point in their life, at any point, in any of the hard work that they put in, ever dreamed that this is what they'd be making. And you can feel the nascent sitcom within Mr. Birchum, a by-the-numbers little cartoon crumbling under the weight of what is imposed on it. The same authoritarianism that inspired Kirby and Morrison, the same unliving corruptive essence here, parasitically surviving by sucking the life out of what could have been, under better circumstances, a story. Probably not a great one, but something. It is the will of the authoritarian made manifest. It uses storytellers in an attempt to subsume and replace storytelling in order to destroy the human capacity to dream. Now, despite my entire vibe, I am self-aware. I know this sounds a little melodramatic. I don't literally think that Mr. Birchum, the shitty little cartoon from the Daily Wire, is an evil demon with a conscious agenda. But now, having framed it this way, I do kind of think on some level that Mr. Birchum, the shitty little cartoon from the Daily Wire, is a demon with a conscious agenda. I'm starting to believe that maybe that is the case. Anyway, Wendy and What's-His-Face try to prove to Birchum they can repair the floor or some shit, but they fuck it up because they don't know tools like Mr. Birchum. They're stupid fucking idiots. They don't know how to fix floors. The house starts to flood because they fixed the floor so bad and they don't want to admit it to Birchum. So Jeannie comes back and does a little routine where she's like the fixer from Pulp Fiction. And
if I'm curt, it's because time is a factor. I think fast, I talk fast, and I need you to act fast if you want to get out of this.
The observant viewer will note that despite there being a line of dialogue referencing her speaking fast, she's speaking painfully slowly. At this point, the show was so boring, I was writing my own jokes in my head. Wendy and Boy were watching The Bachelorette, and I thought it'd be funny if when Birchum got back, he would go against type and be really invested in The Bachelorette. And so, then, when Birchum gets home, the Birchum mind virus somehow reached into my consciousness and made that exact joke.
He picked Kately? After what she said in the hot tub? Well, it's your funeral, pal.
I can't explain to you how it felt in that moment to see my own joke repeated back to me and somehow not finding it funny. How the show seemed to be able to reach inside me and render the act of trying to amuse myself somehow direly unfunny, removing and destroying humor that I had created. Am I dying? Is my imagination dying? In episode 5, Wendy brings the family to build houses for Habitat for Humanity. Birchum pisses and moans about it, and I just gotta say, man, fuck you. Fuck you, man. Your whole thing is that you're supposed to want your family to have strong values and to work hard. You never stop complaining about that. And the second they do, you still can't help but gripe and grouse.
I want you to know it means a lot that you're here.
Great. I already get paid next to nothing for my carpentry expertise at school. Why not downgrade to getting paid literally nothing on the weekend?
What an entitled piece of shit. But at the job site, they do have tools that he likes. So because there's something in it for him, now he does want to build houses and work hard. And nobody else wants to. They all want to do social media or something. And that's bad and selfish. I mean, Birchum also doesn't want to work, but that's fine and good and normal. The artifice has so fully collapsed at this point that there are no stakes, no real conflicts, no lessons, no character arcs. The transformation is complete. We see Birchum laid bare. This is not a story. This is the transmission vector for whatever sickness the Daily Wire is cultivating. Behold this!
I feel like Britney after she got her life back.
That chick's crazy, but she'd be great at demo.
These are no longer characters. This is simply contempt congealed onto screen, but contempt for nothing, for nobody, for its own sake. The family leaves, but then comes back. They were inspired by how Mr. Birchum... Well, anyway, it's a happy ending, because stories have those. So put that in there. That's how stories end. So that's for the spell to work, that's what you got to do. You might find this difficult to believe, but I did not go into this show wanting to hate it. I really tried to see the good in it, because wouldn't that be more interesting if it turned out that I actually liked this cartoon being pitched as this anti-woke, anti-left-wing statement? Wouldn't that be more compelling as a video, me having to justify that to you? Failing that, I suppose, hating it would be a good consolation prize, because it's fun to make fun of shitty stuff. It's fun to pick apart a bad movie or show. But this wasn't fun. I didn't hate this show, not in the way that makes it easy to make fun of. I felt nothing but pity for this show. This small-minded, powerless, empty little show. Whatever malevolent force I have imagined to be at the heart of Mr. Birchum is entirely impotent. It's clawing at us, sneering, but it can't use the power at its fingertips. It doesn't understand what stories are or how to make them work. And in the end, it just ends up trying to copy the homework of other better stories. In episode 4, we see Birchum's origin story, right? He became a teacher because the job was offered to him despite him doing nothing to earn it.
I don't even have teaching credentials, and I hated school when I was in it. Why would I go back? Here's the deal. I'm not a real teacher. Try not to kill each other while I sleep off this hangover.
He initially turns it down, but then at that second, conveniently enough, his wife calls him and explains that their kids needed money or something. I don't fucking remember.
Yellow. That's not good. Eddie's earache got worse. He might need an operation. Do full-time teachers get health coverage?
It doesn't really make a lot of sense because Birchum is a skilled tradesman. He would make a lot more money doing that than working as a teacher. But it doesn't matter. It's just there to suggest Birchum takes his responsibility to his family seriously without having to show us that. It just tells us that.
Sometimes a man has to do what he needs to do, not what he wants to do.
Hey, you're a good dad, Birch.
In season 6, episode 13 of The Simpsons, and Maggie Makes 3, Homer Simpson goes through a, let's say, conspicuously similar situation. There, likewise in flashback, we see Homer having left his miserable dead-end job to pursue his dream of working at the bowling alley. He's fulfilled, and we see both how miserable his old job made him and how happy his new one makes him. Marge feels guilty about having to spoil that when she discovers that she's pregnant, and when Homer finds out, he reluctantly returns to the power plant. He begs for his old job back, and his boss, Mr. Burns, rubs salt in the wound by placing a plaque on the wall which reads, "Don't forget, you're here forever." But Homer doesn't just make that sacrifice and bitch and moan about it. We see that he's used pictures of Maggie to make the plaque read, "Do it for her," because his love for his kids is greater than his dislike for his job. It's worth it for Homer Simpson to make the sacrifice because he feels things. He loves his family. He is alive. Homer Simpson is real. I've watched that episode of The Simpsons maybe 100 times, and it still consistently makes me cry. Birchum, in contrast, sacrifices nothing, but still acts aggrieved, as though we, the audience, are meant to be grateful to him. We should be impressed that he cares enough about his kids to pay the bills, as though that isn't the bare minimum. As though it isn't his responsibility, it's just something he does because he's a good guy.
You're a good dad, Birch.
He is to be owed. Not only does he know better than everyone else in every respect, he's also put in his dues. His wife and kids should obey him not simply because it's better for them if they do, but because their relationship is transactional, and he has given more than they have. He sacrificed something for them, and now they must be gracious and show the proper gratitude. And the thing he is aggrieved about, the horrible sacrifice that he is so bitter about having to make, is having to teach children. Having to instill in the next generation the values he so endlessly prattles on about. He finds no satisfaction in that, or anything it seems, because he's not real, there is no Mr. Birchum, this cartoon is fake, and not a convincing fake. In Grant Morrison's stories about Darkseid, there's a repeated motif of characters saying, Darkseid is. You know how in Bible, God says, I am that I am? It's like a dark reflection of that, right? Darkseid is, and therefore his influence and the evil he represents is. You can't really defeat him, not forever anyway, because he is. Can't not be, he is. If fictional characters, if fiction itself, stories, etc., if they're all real, in a sense, that's a charming idea. But I'd never really thought about the kind of danger within that, because there's very little harm in someone like Homer Simpson or Superman or Bugs Bunny or Sherlock Holmes or Waluigi being real. People create them, or I don't know, maybe contact them, who knows, and then use that to enrich our lives and add to the totality of human culture. But what if you could use that another way? What if you could use it to do the opposite? To limit the scope of our lives, to silence our imaginations, to exert one's will onto other people. I don't think Mr. Birchum can do that. Unlike Darkseid, Birchum isn't. They didn't create a story. He's not alive. They didn't bother. He's not real. It's not difficult to imagine, though, the same team or some other team like them in service to whatever dark entity I may or may not believe is literally controlling their minds and hearts, either improving their abilities or recruiting people whose abilities are a little sharper and returning with something a little more compelling, just enough to ignite that little spark of reality, bringing their vision to life, even if just by happenstance. So, if fiction is real, and I think we have established it might be, we should be very careful about what kind of fiction we give power to, what kinds of stories and characters and influence we allow into our minds. Because if we're not careful, the next Mr. Birchum might just have a
same as the old norm. Everything's changing and I don't know when. This woke nightmare will end. Thank God for Elon Musk and his shitpost memes.
Okay, oh wow, never mind. We're good. They're not going to figure this shit out. That is a huge fucking relief if I'm being honest. Oh my God. So can I go home or what's the deal? Oh shit, yeah, no, I completely forgot you were here, Dracula. You just talked for like 40 minutes straight. You really got to be more assertive. You got to just kind of, I didn't want to interrupt you. No, I get that. It's just, you know, like when I get going, it's hard to stop, right? Like I'm not always like looking to you for that cue. So you kind of have to like jump in. I'm going to be honest, I didn't watch Mr. Birchum. Thank you for watching this hour-long video about the comedy television program Mr. Birchum, which is neither a comedy nor on television. It is a program, though. Gotta give him that. Normally, this is the part where I would say something self-effacing like, "Oh, can you believe I spent 2 months making this?" But I like this video. I like this one. I don't normally like them right after making them, but I like this one. So suck a lemon, haters. But if you're not a hater, why not go on over to patreon.com/thoughtslime and support whatever sickness enabled me to make this. Kissy kissy!